This is the Welcome to Humanity podcast with thought leader and transformative psychiatrist, Dr. Fred Moss. This show focuses on the betterment of humanity on a global scale. Each episode will leave you enlightened, inspired, and ready to make an impact in your world. Welcome to the show. Welcome to your life. Welcome to humanity. Here's Dr. Fred.
Well, hello, listeners. Welcome back, and welcome to another edition of the Welcome to Humanity podcast. This is Dr. Fred, and, like I've been saying, they said I would meet really interesting people if I just got up and did a podcast. So that's what I've been doing, and indeed, that's exactly what's been happening, and today is no exception to that. Now, the truth is, I've met Stephanie Ray before. Stephanie Ray and I have worked together in a growth and development course that we work on together. And we've crossed paths on a number of occasions, actually, with mutual friends and intersecting circles of networks that we share. And I've always just been really, really enchanted and amused by what Stephanie's stand is in the world and what she's been up to. So I asked her to join us on this podcast, and, gracefully she said yes. So I'm just so pleased, so honored, so privileged to have with us today Stephanie Ray. And Stephanie, welcome to the Welcome to Humanity podcast. It's great to have you this morning.
Oh, thank you for having me, Dr. Fred.
So, yeah, it really is a deep pleasure. And you can call me Fred or Dr. Fred. It's funny. Stephanie's called me Dr. Fred 0 times in her life until right about now. So that's kind of cool that she did that. And I can appreciate it. And it goes either way. You can definitely call me Fred or Dr. Fred. Any works for you.
Okay. I'm going to just let it roll however it comes out.
That sounds good. It's okay. So, the essence of the Welcome to Humanity podcast is really to point at what aspects of this human are just like overwhelmingly human, and in that way, extraordinary, magnificent, magical, and miraculous, like something like that. And Stephanie, it's not going to be very hard to get you there, although I think from inside the forest, it's not so easy to see the trees. So maybe you don't notice it, but we're all going to notice it right quick. And we talked a little bit about things that are on our mind this morning that we may want to address, but we don't have to go there, and we can go there. And, let's just see how this organically unfolds. So as all of you know, I meet lots of incredible people who are up to really big things in the world. And Stephanie Ray is just another example of that. No matter whether we are tackling some of the biggest problems in the world or seemingly tiny ones, we still face deep challenges internally and externally. I've worked with more people than I can count from various backgrounds, dealing with more issues than you can imagine of all sizes and shapes. I developed a simple but effective methodology designed to assist others to gain a new sense of freedom and empowerment. The ability to look square down the barrel at whatever they are dealing with, and then march forward becomes reliably more available when using this method. I'm publicly revealing this process and the associated mindset that contributes directly to its maximum effectiveness. It's all laid out really well in my new book called Creative 8, and you can pick that book up at Amazon.com in either Kindle or paperback format. Just go to welcometohumanity.net/creative. Download your free audiobook copy. I look forward to hearing about your Creative 8 breakthrough. Now, let's get back to our conversation with Stephanie Ray. Welcome to humanity. So one of the questions I really, really want to know, this is a way to open up these conversations, is like, Stephanie, who are you? And really, like, who are you? What are you? What are you for the people who know you? And what are you for the world around you? And that's an open-ended question and a tough one, but I think you got the chops to take it on. So Stephanie Ray, who are you?
Thank you for asking. I would say I'm essentially the same person today as I was when I was 4 years old. And I've looked at that a lot of, who am I today? And when I really look into the fabric of things, the constitutionally what makes me up is still there, and it's about people's well-being. I've always cared. I don't know why. I love people. The thing I used to do when I was under 5 was walk up to some kid I would see on our block or at the park and say, "Hi, my name's Stephanie. You want to be my friend?" And
Hmm.
they would be my friend, and
Hmm.
that's who my friends was choosing them. And it's kind of the same today, is looking and choosing who and how do I want to constitute myself. And it really is not made up of just me, it's made up of these individuals that I bump into. And their addition to my life is who's made me even more than what I think I was when I was 4, even more. And, I was a child of the desert. My dad raised us up racing motorcycles in the California desert. So
Hmm.
I am an old time enduro racer.
Wow.
And between races, I would pick herbs on the Mojave Desert.
Wow.
Yeah. And there was a
Say more
really
about that. That's too interesting. So, what does that mean to be raised as a motorcycle racer and pick herbs in between races? Like, give us a little bit of a visual of that, please.
Sure. So there are heats in enduro racing. You get a number of what heat you're going to be leaving in. So every 2 minutes, about 4 to 5 riders are going to take off. And an enduro is a race based on your ability and your timing to be at a certain checkpoint, of which you don't know where those checkpoints are going to be over a 2-hour race. And going over any different types of terrain, can you be at those checkpoints at your appointed time?
Wow.
Yeah, and, my first race, my dad, took a, old Timex of his, put it on my wrist, fixed up a speedometer to my little 50cc Yamaha, and then proceeded on a paper plate to put what mile markers I should be at what time, and duct tape it to my gas tank. And I just looked at my speedometer, my watch, and where I was supposed to be when. And, that very first race, good old engineer Jim, my dad, got me in third place.
Wow. And how old were you then?
8.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I was 8 years old. And the thing that was hilarious about it was he'd forgotten to clean my carburetor. And so I'm in this heat, and it wasn't age related. So I was in this specific takeoff time with different riders. Some had 650 cc's, some had 250s, 125s, and they give off a lot of smoke and dirt. So my little 50cc carburetor kept getting clogged with their dirt.
Hmm.
And so I'd have to, it was like put, and I would, and I'd have to pull over, roll over, take my tools out from underneath my seat, clean, pull out the spark plug, clean it out, blow on it, take a match book, clean it out between the connectors, and then put it back in, and then I could ride for a few more hours, or
How
excuse me, a
long
few
how
more
long are these
miles.
enduro races?
They're 2 hours, so I meant to say a few more miles
Mhm.
before it would become foul. They called it fouling your spark plug, before I would foul my spark plug again. And I realized today, like, how extraordinary that probably was, because not only was I trying to keep just time regularly and per mile according to this paper plate taped to my gas tank, but I was also having to pull over and do some minor adjustments to my carburetor. And yeah, it's just, you who knew, but nobody told me I couldn't.
Mhm.
My dad
Yeah.
just put that on my tank and said, you go. And he wasn't in the same heat as me. None of my family members were, because it's all random. So I was with strangers or people I didn't know. I wouldn't say they were strangers. They were just people I didn't know. Because if you were really in trouble, anybody who rides a dirt bike knows you pull over and you help the rider. You ask, "Are you
Mhm.
okay?"
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, that is so fascinating. Oh my goodness. And so, really, and when you talk about how who you are now is that same girl you was, when you were 4, or not, in this case when you were 8. I'm just getting that while you were pulling over and fixing your spark plugs and getting your carburetor clean, this is the race that you actually ended up in third place in. Is that right?
Mhm.
The same
Yeah.
race? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so Stephanie. I mean, what I want our listeners to get is that that's really is who you are still, and that's why I have the smile from ear to ear. Like, oh my gosh, that is exactly what I count on Stephanie Ray for. What we share is that Stephanie is a course supervisor, for a course that but we both assist with at a pretty high level. And Stephanie, there's some there's some massive obstacles.
Yeah, lots of food trucks and things like that, right?
There's some massive smoke and dirt blowing in our face every weekend.
Yeah.
And we have to clean our carburetors regularly, even when there's no time to do so. Drop the bike, turn it over, fix it while the race is going on, and get back on the bike, and then just finish the race. And we do tend to finish in first, second, or third place.
We do deliver the course. I'm very proud to say, Fred, you do an amazing job, and we do deliver the course, which is our promise, right? We promise that people are going to get value.
Oh, it's just delightful. I really didn't know that about you, and it's just hilarious. It really is. So thank you for sharing that story.
Of course.
And so tell us more. So, there you are in the Mojave, and there you are growing up as a desert girl. And what happens in the next phase of life, this adolescence of Stephanie Ray? What's that look like?
Well, there's these real periods in between, races and writing, and when you just go out, as family and friends for long weekends and vacations, where literally, I would wander the desert and even ride my motorcycle really far back through a ravine and a canyon and just park it and get off and walk around. And I was pretty young, but I didn't know that there was. Not that I didn't know there was danger. I just had a sense that everything was okay. And that's when I would pick herbs, and I would just was fascinated with the smell, the look, the touch, and I would stick them under my legs and hold them tight to my seat and ride back to camp. And there was a guy there named Don Preifogel was his name, and he had this Mexican girlfriend named Maria, and she came over one day, and it never stopped from here. She told me what I had, and I didn't know. I had herbs that were nutritious. Some were astringent. Some could be put in a soup. Some were for poultices. I was fascinated. Like,
Wow.
I thought the sun and moon rose and set with her. Like, I couldn't believe the things that she knew about. And really, what she was, what she kindled in me was I'll just call it smelling with my hands. It's very interesting, but it is almost like when I pick up an herb that I almost can smell it. But now, as having the biochemistry that I've had in my background, I get that, those different organoleptics actually do cross the dermal layer, and our nervous system does pick it up. I am
Right.
getting the information. It
Right.
wasn't made up. But when I was a little kid, I thought that's what I called it. I'm listening with my hands.
Yes.
And then from there, it just was a lifelong love of herbs, of Western herbs. And then when I was like 20 or 21, I met Ron Teagarden. And I used to buy Chinese herbs from him and these bulk herbs. And I would walk in and tell him what was going on, and he'd make this loose batch that I would cook in a gallon of water. And one day I was on my way back. I was actually just landed from New York, and he said, "What are you up to these days?" And I said, "Well, here's where I am. I ended a 2-year relationship. I sold both my cars. I moved to a new city, and I, don't I left my job to go spend 4 weeks in New York." And he said, "Do you want to work here?" And I said, "Absolutely." And that was a Friday, and I started on Monday, and I kind of never looked back. Chinese herbalism just really, it's such a full and expressive art of medicine, science, humanity, the spirit. All those things get addressed and are appreciated to such an extent that I. It was just whatever way I could look. I was like, oh my gosh, and now there's this that I get to learn about, and the rest is kind of history. That's also where I met my future husband, and started a company with him, and this year's our 30th year. We're no longer together, but I still, run our company, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's just, who knew? Who
Yeah.
knew
Who
that
knew?
as a little girl, those things that moved me would actually become my vocation?
Isn't that just great?
Yeah, we just don't know. It's that's the opening, I think.
Yeah, it's just fabulous. So I also didn't know about your relationship with Tea Garden, and it was, for me, I just learned who this man was less than a month ago, and or maybe 2 months ago. But now that I'm hanging out up here in the Grass Valley, Nevada City area, there's a couple places. There's a place called Elixir, and it's some stores here that sell some of his goods. And I just learned that he was down in Santa Monica, and Alexandra was telling me a little bit about his history and who he was. And so it's sort of like what we've talked about with Harvey and who is, by the way, my next podcast guest, believe it or not.
Awesome, Harv.
Harv is great, and but how we get that cross linking that I talked about when I opened up the show, when I opened up this
Mhm.
broadcast, like that we know similar enough people, and sometimes our circles intersect with who we've run into, and we got here taking entirely different paths. It's completely fascinating.
Mhm.
So you have this thing with I think the curiosity is right here now to talk a little bit about your company and about what you and your husband put together and what you now have in BioRay. And if you can give us a little overview of what is this extension of the 4-year-old and the 8-year-old and the little baby herbalist. What is she up to now? What are you doing around the world?
Wow, I like that, baby herbalist. I haven't heard that before. We There's a lot of baby herbalists around that have been taking our herbs since they were 5 and 6 years old, and are now like 21 and 22, who are really well versed. And it's like probably one of the things I'm most proud of is that there are other humans in the world who actually are looking at having a career in herbalism or becoming MDs with a focus on botanicals and including them in an integrative practice. And what's happening today is exactly those kids. Is we found that underlying Tim and I, Dr. Timothy Ray and I, that's my former husband, and we still collaborate together. He now lives in Europe and has a new wife, and she's also Dr. Ray,
Hmm.
which, by the way, I don't think we mentioned. So I'm a board certified naturopath. I have a doctorate in naturopathy, and I have 30 years experience in traditional Chinese medicine, and about 15 years experience, or 20 years experience in biochemistry. So evaluating urine and saliva um, results in our clinical practice. That was one of our methodologies for evaluating the terrain, and the pHs, the nitrates, the ammonia, the sugars, and the salts, and it triangulates and it gives us a picture biochemically how this human's body is working.
Hmm.
And then you can intervene with an herb, with a food, with a supplement, and see how it shifts that. And does it shift the biochemistry towards balance, or does it push it further away from what we call zero, where there's zero need, and everything's balanced?
Hmm.
And so that was kind of our specialty in Santa Monica. Tim and I had about 5 clinics over a 14-year period, and they were my joy. I built them from scratch. I built out the labs, the treatment rooms, the library, which was always so fun because it was a communal library where people got to sit and read our books that Tim and I collected for decades. And yeah, it's a place where really looking at with people what it is they want their body to be like. What's possible, and chronic illness or acute illness, that's one thing, but there's this other place you can get to, which is called tonic herbalism, and it's something that Ron is very, very good in. And tonic herbalism is taking a healthy person and really enhancing all of that, like whether it's the spirit or the mind, the intellect, or it's the sexuality. And so there's specific tonic herbs that enhance those other things in a person. And so, it's been a really rich and rewarding career I've had in those regards. But I would say that really ultimately where I got to was seeing how many children were affected by the level of pollution on the planet, the environmental toxins, and it's everything from heavy metals to chemicals. They block the neurotransmitters to the brain. 1 in 6 children in this country have a learning issue. 1 in 4 children in this country have unhealthy levels of mercury still to this day, and
Mm,
everybody thinks things are better. And it affects their ability to think and come and be here and have the life they came here to live.
mhm,
And so what I found was Chinese herbalism is the perfect companion for traveling this road of unwinding that and having toxins leave in the body. And Tim and I partnered in that, and we were really passionate about it, and we're still very passionate about it. Tim, he supplies herbs for pharmacies in Europe, and I've gone, direct to people,
mm,
supplying them directly to moms and dads for themselves and for their kids.
mm. So that's just completely inspiring. And, you may not know that. Well, I have it that you can't know the level of inspiration that you provide just by being you and being you so totally and wholly from the center out, and you really can't notice how we, the non Stephanie Rays in the world, can only be inspired by who you are and what you're here to provide for the circle of people who know you, or really the world at large. And so a great level of gratitude and thanks from me representing all of us who aren't you for being you. And so I just want to pass that along to you.
Thanks, Fred. Thanks for
Eh,
the acknowledgement.
Yeah. And there is this next piece, which is, well, so let's formalize this company that you and Tim created. Let's give it a name, and what do you really do? And let's talk a little bit about that. I just think it's the next curious step to step over here so that the listeners can hear that. What is it you do now? Like, I hear who you are and how it got to be with who you are, but what is your practice, or what is your job, or what is your occupation? Where does your passion carry you day to day inside this venture?
I'm thrilled to share that. So the company's called BioRay, BIORAY, and bio, it means organic. And Tim and I actually chose that because we really believe in people being organic, beings, and that we want and need to follow that natural biology of the body for unwinding things. But what I do today and really inspires me is I'm the main key formulator for BioRay, and I do studies. So I've done intervention studies on children and gut health, and showed how giving a probiotic lysate, which is a cell wall broken blend of 11 different probiotics, can decrease gut inflammation and leaky gut by 55% and 27% respectively in as little as 3 weeks.
Hmm.
So looking at, we know probiotics are awesome. However, there's different methodologies in the way that they can be delivered. And we found that breaking the cell wall of probiotics actually changes the effect, and they're no longer colonizers, but they now have this pushing action. So instead of being like the armadas landed on the beach and going to colonize the entire intestinal tract, now we've kind of got these stealth Navy SEAL fighter dudes that come in and push all the bad guys out. So now the gut can heal. And it happens very quickly when these bad guys aren't there. So it's studies like that that I just love doing. And then, really, I would say the essence of what it is that I'm taking these formulations that we create, and I am translating them for the Western practitioner, the Western mind, because a Western
Mhm.
MD doesn't necessarily understand what damp heat is, or a wet cough,
Mhm.
they don't, or wet phlegm. They don't understand. In TCM, we're really looking at the attributes of those the disharmony or the dysbiosis. So what brings harmony, what brings symbiosis, as we look at that in TCM, and it means that we don't give a diagnosis. It means that we
Right.
are looking at, oh, this thing is happening and it has a relationship with this other organ system. And wow, might they be eating a lot of fried food right now and sugary things? And you're putting pieces together. It's definitely more strategic. And
Yeah.
what I do is I put that into the formulas. I hear about, learn about, people come to me with issues, and I listen to them and I hear what it is, and then I formulate accordingly. And then what's really interesting is then more people with those issues come in, and then suddenly you've got a formula that's helping more than one person. And
Hmm.
quite literally, we test every formula and the biochemistry of 40 individual people minimum, pre and post, before we ever say that it's ready for public consumption. So, in many of our
That's
formulas,
amazing.
it's several thousand patients, their pre and post urine and saliva, so we know what's this formula doing. When you tincture something, it quite literally creates a whole new substance that sometimes can't even be measured. Like a lab can't measure that. Oh, we had reishi mushroom in here and maitake and some chlorella and a little lycium, and it's completely um, changed, or it's an amalgam of this blend, and it's no longer detectable by the individual parts. It's now a new substance.
Hmm. That's fascinating. So, I didn't know that I was doing this, but I wish I could show you a picture. Maybe I'll somehow put it on our screen. But I am wearing my muscarinus shirt. I have this amazing muscarinus shirt, and it was in fact chosen for me to as a remedy by a homeopath that I work with. One remedy ago, almost perfect, and it worked. It worked great, and so we're really talking this idea of the whole mycelium, and then who you are. To me, the person you reminded me of is Samuel Hahnemann, and the idea that
Mm.
as you tincture stuff down, or as you potentiate, or as you create formulations, and that isn't good enough. It isn't good enough to just take on what this thing is supposed to do, or what the books say it does, or even what history, or that woman that the sun and moon rise by that you met in the desert. It's not so much as just knowing what they say and then following what happens. There's something about what I think you're pointing to here, that the stuff gets tested at 40 minimum and thousands likely when you create a formulation that's geared towards rebalancing something that's off kilter a bit, as a natural way of being, and not as a and not as like a pathological diagnosis. Is that accurate? Am I on board here?
Yeah, you did
Yeah.
an excellent job of recreating that, Fred.
Well,
Excellent.
yeah, and I'm one of these Western MDs, so I must be out there.
Yeah.
So, so look, it's really I was wondering in your examination, in your what do they call it? Uh, Constitution, in as evaluating one's constitution, or is that a conversation, or do you have to be in the same space as them, or is that something they could write to you about, or you could do that on a telephone, or how do you get closer and closer to getting what it is that needs to be
Addressed.
needs to be addressed and then can be addressed so specifically?
So we have an 8-page questionnaire. So there's the we have to know things. You have to know things about, is this person, first of all, what do they say the issues are? Acute,
Right.
chronic, what are they? How were they raised up? What were the main first foods they ate in the first 5 years of life? Because that's the information that the body, the brain, the nervous system gets to extract nutrition, nutrients, and different beneficial phytochemicals and polysaccharides and other things, minerals for building this little baby human, from 1 to 5 years. And so, like a lot of times, we see issues with people that decide to become vegan at 21 or 24 or 27, and they're always sick. But I'm eating organically and I'm not eating meat anymore. And it's like, well, what'd you eat the first 5 years of life? And then so we have to create a plan. And oftentimes that means creating a homeopathic of the meats they had during the first 5 years of life. Like
Interesting.
energetically, the body still has that, oh, that's where we're going to get B12.
Hmm.
It's a very, and that's based on biochemistry. But to go further into, the how does somebody get to know this? It is it's a practice, and I'm not practicing anymore. The way that I do assist people today is actually through BioRay's customer service team. So we do free 15-minute consults, and basically, we also ask questions and put it back on people for ha- you know assisting them on where to look and what to generate.
Hmm.
And then there is, of course, after 30 years of this, that there are very clear signs and signals of the way. Yes, of course, in my education, I know how the body works. You know how the body works, but biochemistry wise, we're different because Fred, I bumped into different chemicals and heavy metals and emotional upsets than you did, and
Hmm.
so it constitutes us differently. But overall, I would say there's some really basic physiological things that all of us need to address. Number one, all of us need to be pooping every day. Like, I can't tell you how many people still, might question that. Well, that's all right. I didn't go today. Well, no. And it actually should be like 2 to 3 times, like every, as many meals as a person has in a day.
Hmm.
Next, we look at liver function, because if the liver's not healthy, filtering things through, it's not going to be removing toxins. And in TCM, the liver is the valve for the emotions, anxiety, frustration. And if it's not filtering things, those emotions back up and they get expressed. You see a very anxious person or ADHD type person or OCD type thinking, because why? Well, ammonia is not being filtered through the liver. And so
Hmm.
it's has an affinity for the brain, and you see somebody who's can't get off a thread, these
Hmm.
spinning thoughts
Hmm.
continue. So we just gently follow these different pathways. Next, we look at the GI tract. And it tends to be following these natural pathways that a lot of things get resolved on their own, and B, it gets quiet enough that the inner healer can wake up and people actually go, ooh, you know what? I think I need that artemisian clove. I think I picked up a parasite or an unwanted organism at that, salad bar at Erewhon.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
it
Hmm.
and that's the ideal that we create a situation where people can actually hear what their body needs. It's quiet enough that they can hear that. And then they get to choose, like, oh, yeah, this is that remedy. When I felt this way, that one worked.
That's
And
fascinating.
they become their own barefoot doctor to a degree, which is in Chinese what most people are. They're trained to a certain degree to handle and maintain their vitality. And we lost that in this country when we gave away our rights to homeopathy. At the turn of the century, we kind of shot ourselves in the foot. Although I'm so happy that we definitely are having a resurgence.
Hmm. Yeah, we could spend a lot of time talking about the Flexner Report. We could spend a lot of time talking about 1905. We could spend a lot of time talking about what really happened at the turn of that century that really altered the way that American or Western medicine took direction. And it is a resurgence now. For whatever reason, it does appear, I hope that it's not in our little small circles and not beyond, but it seems to me, and certainly up here in Grass Valley and Nevada City, that there's an interest, and the interest is like it's absorbing. Once you can start learning, like today I woke up with this headache, and it was like a pretty disturbing headache, actually. And it was and it was in a band, and it was in a front to back band from the front of my head to the back of my head, a little bit left of center. It was like, oh, what is that? What is that? What the hell is that? Because I don't like having my head hurt. And there was something like, well, I think it might actually come. I could be wrong about this, but it might actually come from last night when it's garbage day today, and I cleaned the cat litter last night. And it was like, I think that's where it came from. That, I was able to say that. I'm not going to tell you I'm 100% confident that that's directly where it came from. But there was some degree of confirmation that, oh no, that is exactly where this came from. And and I think I'm attributing that to now I presently am not taking the herbs in BIORAY, although I am highly interested in having a further conversation with you in this area. But that becoming more and more attuned to who I am as the barefoot healer is something that's extraordinary. And it's like now more than ever, who I am in the gym, or who I am when I'm stretching, or who I am when I'm lying down, or who I am when I'm walking or thinking or creating. There's a new sense that I have a working feedback system that I can actually listen to inside of this thing I call myself, that allows me to create proper alterations towards healing and balancing.
Yes, that's accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's accurate. And one of the things about cat litter, by the way, it's pretty much pure ammonia.
Exactly. No, that's what made me think. That's fascinating, isn't it? That's what you just said. It's pure ammonia. It goes up my left nostril into my brain. Like, there you go. What you're talking about. Exactly.
Well, and ammonia has an affinity for the brain.
That's
So whether you're getting
interesting.
it directly in your face that way, or a person's not processing toxins throughout the day, it will rise up slowly throughout the day. In the evening, there's nowhere for it to go. It already had an affinity for the brain, and you try to lay down and go to sleep. Oh my gosh, so many people with, they don't correlate their lack of ability to get to sleep and stay asleep with the health of their liver.
That is
And
so interesting.
yeah.
Wow. Well, that is so clearly what happened yesterday, because I don't want to go into details, although we can giggle it away. What it took for me to clean that box last night.
Yeah, you definitely, want to have your, medicinal mushrooms and your
Yeah.
different adaptogens that are,
Yeah.
hepatic protectors. They
Yeah, that's great.
modulate the immune system within the liver. They help the two detox pathways, help the toxins leave, excess
That's great.
cholesterol, ammonia, all of it. So it's the hardest working organ in our body, actually. It has over 500 physiological functions, and it's so
Wow.
important. The Chinese call it the general of the army.
Yeah. That's wild. I love that. And what's wild about it, frankly, it's not that wild. It's sort of truthful. What's wild about it is that somehow we've been let off that course and no longer know that as so-called the strongest society on the planet, or at least we think we are, that we've been led off that pathway and actually think that the things are not that anymore is as astonishing in its own right as it appears to be astonishing to hear it now. It's like, wow, how did we forget this? Or what kind of forces let us off that path?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Well,
Yeah.
let's get back here, because I think there's, as we talked a lot about a little bit before we got started with this conversation, there's a synergism between what we both do. And so there's something like, the name of this podcast and the name of my company or my brand is Welcome to Humanity. And there's the same kind of thing of really just embracing everything that's so, and then making micro adjustments with the notion that what we have here is a exquisite healing machine, completely ready to make the alterations necessary to give us an optimized life. Like, that's really what's here to be had. And with proper adjustments and supplementations or redirections, micro direction, micro management of directions, etc., you can regain balance that one can regain balance that they didn't even know that they lost. And that's what my work is too. My work is that too. And inside conversation, inside what we hear or what we see, there's an opportunity to hear and see something different, and then simply alter the way that life is being experienced by somebody. Like, simply alter fundamentally, like profoundly and fundamentally alter the way that life is being experienced. And it's simple, right? I learned my stuff when I was 4 too, Stephanie. I say the same thing. It's like the stuff I'm talking about now, this Welcome to Humanity stuff. This is not out of reading journals. And this is out of, wait a minute, I knew this stuff when I was 4 and I was correct then. So I'm going to just bring that forth now that I'm 62 and remind you that this is just humanity. This is just what it looks like. And it's not that difficult. But boy, when you get into really looking at details, you can provide micro corrections that can be extraordinary for other people.
Yeah. And what would be some of those corrections from your field, Fred?
Well, I think, from my field, what we really have is that people, you mentioned earlier, this idea of, that it's not a diagnosis, that we don't make a diagnosis. We really just, find out what areas of life had someone stumble or had someone then take on that this is how life is, or what happened, or what did they hear or see or experience that had them then create what was happening for, like agree to in some ways, and then take on and absorb that that's the way that life is. And so inside conversations and inside really backing up to look at and then giving compassion to those experiences without getting too deep into the past, we can create futures. We can create an opportunity to embrace all of life, including the stuff that's completely uncomfortable, including the stuff that's really absolutely unpleasant or even painful, including stuff that is, disarming or threatening or terrifying. Those things, along with the things that are really beautiful and really miraculous and interesting and attractive, and all those things, like really take on all of this whole experience of life, and getting to really look at those things square on. One can get that they never were sick. One can get that there's no inherent mental illness. In my case, there's nothing here that has you having been zapped by a bug of mental illness, forever to deteriorate. That is simply a conversation that's subject to profound transformation. So in my world, what we can do is we can alter those conversations from the ground up and then create a life that actually works, that has nothing to do with having psychiatric illness at all, not at all. The impact of that is that people who have been pretty certain that they've had psychiatric illness for years and years, or even decades and decades, can be left in an empowering state, and having learned that it wasn't an illness at all, and it has not been an illness, and what's now in front of them is the capacity to live a truly empowered life, in a world where that's not so simple to come around. So
Yeah.
that's what we're up to here. At least
Wow.
one part of what we're up to. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what I hear in that is, the fullness of it.
Exactly.
There's a fullness in somebody looking at all of it, and perhaps like you said, you don't dwell too deeply in some of these things from the past. However, the acknowledgement of them, and I think all of that is very healthy. I look at, in from my perspective of TCM, is we call it aberrant. It's when something's aberrant and it's not oscillating, it's not turning at the correct speed or direction. And sometimes, people can be an aberration. Cancer is considered an aberrant cell.
Mhm.
If it's oscillating at the correct speed, it doesn't turn into, quote, cancerous.
Mhm.
And so, when I hear what you are up to and what you're offering people, it's like you're offering an opportunity for people to oscillate at their own speed, like the best speed for them and in the direction that works for them. And it's balanced and healthy.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like what we both have is this is not for everyone. If you're actually, if one is still sure that that there's something inherently wrong with them, then I can't dislodge that naturally. I mean, if one is committed to really needing to know that there's something inherently wrong with the way that they are created,
Mm-hmm.
then sort of not yet ready for this conversation is what I would say.
Yeah.
Uh, you
Yeah.
know, but the people who finally reach the point where it's like, wow, wait a minute here, there's nothing inherently wrong with me, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing inherently wrong with me. Well, those are people who are subject to actually looking at things in maybe a new or unimagined way, a previously unimagined way, and creating a life that otherwise, otherwise simply wasn't available beforehand. And that's the kind of work that I'm doing, and sounds like kind of the work that you're doing too. And it's like little micro adjustments in the world of uh, what your sensory organs take in, or even in your case when you're talking about feeling the herbs or smelling the herbs with your hands, or your skin. There's something like that as well, like really getting that we're not limited to the five senses in any way, shape, or form either. And there's these realms and domains that are part of our existence that don't really get their fair share of conversation. That once they're honored, without even needing to be described, once they're honored, you get a wholeness of a person that then becomes with honor and compassion, that then can further oscillate properly, vibrate properly to the tune that the world is really calling for. And I don't know, it sounds a little woo woo, I suppose, and at the same time, it sure seems to me like we're finally doing some work that's really healing. And there's nothing more rewarding than, I don't have much else to do than to just pour back onto the people I know and the people I meet, any kind of healing to make this life slightly more enjoyable or slightly more satisfying.
Yeah. I don't think it's woo woo. I think that saying it's woo woo is a very kind of cynical thing. When people say that's a
Exactly.
very cynical thing to say, because we have had a process of, whether it was observing animals and plants before, quote, religion. Then there was religion. We've always given spirit. The act of giving back, of charity, of helping another. That's a spiritual act to me. And so when we are devoid of being capable of acknowledging spirit, in all its many forms, I think it's a very limited life. And it wouldn't occur to
Hmm.
me that that is a life that has much like brightness to it or
Exactly.
vitality to it or just happy to be here. Like, who wants to be here if it's not fun? I mean, that was actually a conversation I got into with my father at 16. And I said, Dad, I want to do things in life that I love, are fun. And he said, Oh, that's ridiculous, Stephanie. You always have to do things in life you hate. Well, what better impetus for Stephanie to go out and create a
Yeah.
life that was,
Prove them wrong.
counter to that? Even though I was a daddy's girl, I definitely am my father's daughter.
Hmm.
But, there was just something about the cynicism of that rubbed me the wrong way. And I was like, in my mind, I'm going to show him and I'm going to have a great life.
Isn't that great?
Yeah. And so all those things really conspire to have us have a very generous, prosperous life in so many ways. When I say prosperous, I mean in spirit, I mean in
Hmm.
our expression and the fullness of it, the
Hmm.
people in it. I wouldn't be anything without the people that I have around me, including you, Fred.
Thank
I
you.
mean, all these constitute me. How you see me constitutes me.
Hmm.
And I don't know today. That's the thing that worries me about politics today, and what we're seeing in the world today is people aren't fully being responsible for how powerful their words are, and it not only constitutes the person who's listening to it, it constitutes them, the person saying it. And
Hmm.
I don't know about anybody else listening to this, but I maintain I came here to do something positive for the world. And those other conversations don't forward that momentum of life and appreciating others and the gift of others and the beauty of others and the magic of others. And so, I really am careful about my words. I'm careful about who I even listen to. And that discrimination seems to me to be at a minimum right now.
Hmm.
And it has me concerned.
Yeah. Well, we certainly could have a whole conversation about. I share that concern. I share the concern to my bones, and there's and even further than that, to the marrow and then to the spirit, and there's it's really calls me forth. It calls me forth. What I got, and I really got, is that when I said it sounds woo woo, I wasn't really speaking from my heart. I was speaking for sort of like apologetically for those who are listening, going, "Oh my God, listen to listen to Stephanie and Fred, blah blah blah." Anyways, we're
Hmm.
on our way to the pharmacy, or we're on our way to the allopath. We're on our way to a bag of Doritos. We're on our way to whatever we're on our way to. And Stephanie and Fred can have those conversations. But in reality, that isn't me at all. And your fierce warrior, I think our listeners just got a little taste of what this 16-year-old is saying to her father, and what the fierce warrior of the baby herbalist is saying to the world around. Like that, there's a real opportunity to have life be fun. I mean, to have life be useful, to have life be of things that you love doing while we're here for this very short time. And I really honor that. I really honor that in you, and I honor the spark you are. I mean, really, the clean carburetor you run with. That's really right here as you clean out that spark plug. What's the word that they called it about your spark plug?
When you foul, your spark plug gets fouled.
How do you
Isn't
spell
that
that
an
word?
interesting word too?
What is it?
Foul.
How do you
Foul,
spell?
Foul.
Oh, foul, like a foul ball.
Yeah. Hmm.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Isn't that
Okay.
fascinating? Yeah, you just fouled your spark plug. Or your spark plug's fouled. I mean, like it's so parallel. You're doing a really awesome job, Fred. The parallels of a carburetor or the race.
Mhm.
Yes, these things aren't accidents. And that's
You're
another
right.
thing, to be responsible for. This isn't an accident. I did come here, other people come here, and we came here to, to honor each other and respect each other. And, I say that anything else is to look at and to get, well, what do I need to learn from this?
Hmm.
And it's useful for that, but
Hmm.
not to buy into that negativity.
Right. No, the negativity is here. It's here to be had at any given moment. It's right around every corner. The
Mhm.
possibility of disregarding anything that anything that's headed towards healing is there. There's like a counter influence that is at times extraordinary and so well built. And it's like, wow, 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 wow. And I think mm, when like-minded souls run into a conversation, it's just it has me be as this morning has. It has me stand up on my own 2 feet and get, okay, you know what, I do have a reason to be here today. I really do. I have, like, I didn't know that just an hour or two ago, and now I reminded, like, oh yeah,
Mhm.
I got stuff to do today. I got a walk to take. I got people to meet. I got eyes to look into. And I have opportunities to rebalance myself, or to head towards balancing myself, and in fact to make an impact on others. And what an honor, what a complete honor to have that day after day, or maybe not even day after day, but like right now, right here. And
Mm.
that's what's here, is that, wow, if I stop and look around, I'm here right now to continue doing exactly that. And that's what we're doing, Stephanie. That's what this conversation is. So completely appreciate it. I know I'm speaking for our listeners by just honoring you, and with sheer gratitude for sharing with us today. So
Well,
fabulous.
thank you.
Yeah,
For me, Fred, this is all a miracle. Your listeners are a miracle. People listening to us, you're a miracle. This may not have happened. This conversation may not have happened, and it has, and I claim it as being a miracle.
me too. I'm in. I'm in 100%. So why don't you give, if people want to follow you now, if they're like, oh yeah, I want to know, I want to know more about BioRay. I want to know about Stephanie Ray. I want to know about, like how to keep in touch with you, or how to contact you, or how to watch you, or whatever. How might they do that?
Well, there's Dr. Steph at bioray.com is my email, and bioray.com is the place, where I put what I learn and into formulas, and those are there, including studies that I have instigated, and articles that have been written and published in peer-reviewed journals are there, and yeah, tips of the trade. I write books on processes to take somebody through a GI, restoration or a heavy metal detox. 30 years of doing this, it really, like, do you notice, Fred, like your body of work? I would have never said this about myself, even in my 40s, where I'm like, wow, I just keeping at something, you create this body of work, something gets developed,
Isn't that right?
that
Hmm.
there's no way to know at the beginning what it's going to look like along the way. But these pieces, got written and published and shared, and now they're available for people to use them as they will for whatever piece of usefulness they'd give to somebody else.
That's great. That's just great. And who is, so is it, just for the record, is it Steph, Steph, Dr. Steph, or
Yeah,
STF?
just DRSTEPH, Dr. Steph at bioray.com.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think it's time. We're almost at an hour of this conversation. It seems like it's only taken 3 or 6 minutes, and so let's have another one. Of course, we will very soon, and maybe even come back on this show. That would be awesome to have you on this podcast again.
It'd be fun.
Yeah, and anything else you want to say? Anything else you want to say to our listeners, or for yourself, or to me, or anything before we actually close this down?
I think it really came out of our between us at the end, towards the end of this conversation, which is this moment may not have happened, and for
Yeah.
each of us sitting listening right now, the fact that you're here listening, it's a miracle to be here. And just having that thought will shift the cells in the body towards health. And it's being aware of that, and doing that more and more and more, somebody really can make a difference for themselves and for others by taking that on.
Fabulous. Awesome, Stephanie. Totally great. All right.
Thanks, Fred. Thanks for having me. I so appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a pleasure, and I totally appreciate you as well. So, to our listeners, thank you for staying on, and what a fascinating conversation indeed. And take from this what you will. It's time, now's the time. And I think, as Stephanie just told us, it's just something like, this didn't have to happen. And the fact that we're here right now, like really wherever you are right here, right now, listening to this, is a miracle. It really is. And it's a miracle, meaning that of all the quadzillion things that could be happening, this is what is happening. So therefore it's a miracle. And there's just something that really sink our teeth into and generate a life that is satisfying, or even that is a contribution, or even beyond that is enjoyable. Or, as Stephanie said, like, why do it if it's not fun? So thanks again, Stephanie, for being on the show. To our listeners, thank you for listening. Have a great day. Have a great life. Until next time, welcome to humanity. Really, really deep pleasure to have you here. Hey, listeners, thank you so much for tuning in again today. I really, really appreciated this conversation with Stephanie Ray today. So many things come to mind about how awesome she is and how great the interview went. Who knew that she was a motorcycle racer when she was 8? And who knew that she's using the exact same skills when she was racing motorcycles and finding herbs in the desert to bring forth healing for the world around us? And who knew how funny she was? And who knew really how committed and how deep and fierce of a warrior she is in bringing healing to the people that she knows, and in people who know those people, and on. What a pleasure to introduce her to you, and what a deep pleasure it was to meet Stephanie Ray at a deeper level. Maybe as you were listening, you thought of a person or someone in your family, a colleague, a friend, who would love to hear this episode. Now would be as good a time as any to reach out to them and invite them to listen, and then to subscribe to the Welcome to Humanity podcast. While you're at it, it's time for you to subscribe as well. It has a huge effect on the listenership of this program. Also, if you appreciate what we're doing here, if it's making a difference for you, go ahead and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. I would be truly grateful for that support. You see, subscribes and reviews are the two major ways we reach more listeners with the Welcome to Humanity podcast. And if you want to catch up on past episodes, head on over to the welcometohumanity.net/podcast. Until next time, this is Dr. Fred, and it has been another Welcome to Humanity podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Have a beautiful day.